Hello everyone, Tmmgamer here, and today I have the pleasure of talking about a very interesting topic for the first Sunday Talk video I've done in a while. Now, the topic I've chosen today was recommended to me a couple of weeks back, I think, or a week back, by someone. I've forgotten their name. I'm really sorry that I've forgotten your name, and I couldn't find it when I had a quick look through the comments earlier today. But if it was you, don't be afraid to leave a comment in the comments and claim your moment of glory, because it's a topic that I think is going to be really interesting to talk about. And if you're holding on with bated breath, that topic is whether I think there will be intelligent or otherwise life in the rest of the universe, because that is a big question that's, you know, captivated people for centuries. You know, whether we are the only life in the galaxy or even in the entire universe. Are we that special, or is the galaxy and the universe teeming with all of this life? So that's what I really wanted to talk about. Are we unique? Are we the only intelligent life form in the galaxy, or are we going to discover someone when we can eventually get our telescopes out far enough to see them, or pick up radio transmissions or whatever? So let's dive straight into that. Now, the first bit of evidence for extraterrestrial life in other parts of the galaxy is Saturn's moon Titan. Now, Saturn's moon Titan is quite unusual because scientists predict that it has quite a dense atmosphere, and some of scientists actually predict that there can be water on this planet. So if there is water on the planet, there can be life, because obviously, as everyone knows, water is the key ingredient to life. So the fact that we can find water on other planets or other moons within our very own solar system suggests that life might be forming on these planets. And there was a theory that, you know, several million years ago, Mars was actually a water-based planet and had a proper atmosphere, but solar winds blew the atmosphere away, and that's one of the fears that could actually happen to our planet. You know, its atmosphere could get blown away. So you have two instances in our very own solar system where scientists think that there might have been or might still be intelligent life, because scientists are still studying both of these places. They might have discovered frozen water or ice underground in Mars, and they think they're going to find water in the atmosphere of Titan's moon. And this is all hypothetical at this stage. Obviously, there's no concrete information, but the very point I'm trying to make here is that if the scientific community thinks that there might be, or a possible chance even, of intelligent life in our very own solar system, and we make up one of billions and billions of stars and solar systems in the universe, if scientists think that there might even be the tiniest chance of life in our solar system apart from us, that means that there is a huge chance of life being somewhere, even if it's just an amoeba or, you know, some bacteria. The chances of life being somewhere in the universe are just huge. And my second piece of evidence in favour of extraterrestrial life builds on that a little bit, and it's called the Drake equation. Now, this is quite complicated and boring mathematics, so I'm not going to go in too far, but basically it was an estimate and an attempt to try and estimate how much life will be in the universe. And it punches in a whole bunch of numbers. I'm going to go through them briefly, but it's the number of civilizations in our galaxy which communications might be possible. And that's what you're trying to find out. And you do all of this by adding and subtracting all these numbers, which is the average rate of the star formation per year, the fraction of those stars that have planets, the average number of planets that can potentially support life, the fraction of the above that actually go on to develop life, the fraction of the above that actually go on to develop intelligent life, and the fraction of the civilizations that develop a technology that releases detectable signals, and then finally the length of time such civilizations release detectable signals into space. And that sounds a mouthful, but basically all it is, it's trying to estimate the chances of a solar system spawning intelligent life that can communicate with us. So don't get too bogged down with all the complicated maths or whatever, but basically what the Drake equation suggests is that it is very likely for there be a possibility of intelligent life to communicate with us. And you can punch in all of these numbers and get a figure out of the end above 1. So whilst that isn't hugely likely, you know, in the grand scheme of things, for us to find something right on our doorstep, in the entire universe, or even just in our galaxy, the chances of having another civilization that has evolved far enough to communicate us, is still in that evolved state, and then sends off their signal in our direction and for us to pick it up, I think that's a very, very high probability that there's going to be some intelligent life or otherwise in other parts of the galaxy. And if it's quite likely that there'll be intelligent life in our galaxy, it's almost certain that there'll be other intelligent life in the entire universe, because the universe is so big. It's still expanding as well, so it's still getting bigger and bigger and bigger. New stars are constantly being born. There are billions and billions of galaxies in this universe that we haven't even heard of, and even the galaxies that we have spotted we haven't properly looked at. So the Drake equation really just suggests that there is a very, very high chance of extraterrestrial life out there that can communicate with us. And if there's a chance of life that can communicate, and that chance is quite high, the chance of having some like little piece of grass or an amoeba or some bacteria somewhere in the universe is surely 99.99%. So that is the next bit of evidence. It's not really evidence, I suppose, but it's an equation that puts in all the data we can, and the result that it suggests is that life is going to be fairly common and abundant in other parts of the galaxy. Now, the next bit of evidence that I want to bring up is the WOW signal. Now, this is quite a well-known signal. It's been reported all over the place, but basically, I'm going to run you through it if you've never heard this before. In 1977, at the Ohio State University, they had a telescope called the Big Ear Radio Telescope, and the Big Ear Radio Telescope was used to basically listen into space, try and pick up signals, and interpret those signals in terms of numbers to show whether they were useful or not. Now, most of the time, this thing just picked up the background fuzz of the universe, and what the great thing is you can do actually is if you have an old style TV and detune it, some of that hiss is actually background radiation from the creation of the universe, and that's something that I find absolutely incredible, that your TV set can pick up the background fuzz of the universe. So this telescope was pointing into the stars, trying to listen to something. Obviously most of the stuff was coming back was rubbish, but what made this day special was that they got a radio signal which was, I think, 6EQUJ5. And now this doesn't actually mean anything to you or me, but what really was important about this signal is they got a radio signal that sounded like it could have been intelligent life, but it wasn't from a planet. It was from an empty patch of space. So basically, they picked up what they think is a radio signal or some other form of communication. They picked that up in an empty patch of space. So now, because this signal came from an empty patch of space, it's obviously sent minds worrying that it could be sent from a spaceship or some sort of communication vessel in the stars. And obviously this is jumping to huge conclusions, but I think it's incredible that we've picked up a message, a radio message or some sort of message from empty space. I mean, how can that be possible if there isn't an extraterrestrial organism flying around in a spaceship? And I know that's jumping to quite a big conclusion, but that is so incredible to me, that a signal's been picked up literally in the middle of nowhere that nothing could have caused. It wasn't a planet just making its grunting noises or whatever noises a planet makes when it rotates the sun. It was from a completely empty patch of space. And that signal is really, really interesting to me, and what caused that. And if you're wondering why it's called the WOW signal, it's because the technician who was on duty at the time couldn't believe what he was seeing. Because, most of the time the signals that came through were meaningless. It was just numbers and dots and dashes and nothing, nothing of any interest at all. But when he saw this signal, he was so surprised and so shocked that I actually highlighted it and wrote next to it "wow" in his surprise, because he was so surprised and so enthusiastic about this signal. So that is why forever I think it's going to be known as the WOW signal. But the last bit of information that I'm going to bring out in support of this argument for extraterrestrial life is that we have found life on our own planet which doesn't conform to any of the normal definitions of life, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more. Now, me, you, everyone listening to this video, everyone in the world, every person, every deer, every lion is made up of a carbon-based atom. So we are known as carbon-based life forms. And pretty much everything on the planet is a carbon-based life form. In fact, I used to think that everything on the planet was a carbon-based life form. And so did the scientific community. Carbon is the structure of our cells, of our atoms, of everything that makes us who we are. So we used to think that life in other parts of the galaxy or the universe or wherever would have to follow the same pattern as us. You know, would have to be carbon based, would have to be, you know, develop on roughly similar paths, you know, turn into bipedal people, or, you know, even if they did have 3 heads or 15 eyes or whatever, life would follow a fairly predictable path based on the carbon based life form. And that's why a lot of time and effort was spent looking at planets in what was called the Goldilocks area. So that is a planet which is close enough to the sun to be warm enough that the ice isn't, you know, that there isn't covered in ice, so the water can flow and be used and be drank and have fish swimming in it and all of that stuff, but not so close to the sun that it turns so boilingly hot that nothing can live. Now, under this traditional understanding of life, there really aren't that many planets or moons where people or civilizations or life can live, because there's only a finite number of planets that aren't too scaldingly hot and aren't too blisteringly cold, and that have water and have an atmosphere and all of these certain things. But there's been a discovery in, I think it's Yosemite National Park. Yes, Yosemite National Park. Now, what makes this discovery so fantastic, and it's only a discovery of a little microbe, you know, in the grand scheme of things, this little microbe isn't that important. But if you actually look at its DNA structure, it's an arsenic-based life form. You know, I was saying that everything else in the planet is carbon-based. You know, I'm carbon-based, a deer's carbon-based, a lion's carbon-based. And for carbon-based life forms, arsenic is poisonous. So if I was to chug some arsenic, you'd have to get me to a hospital pretty quickly, because, you know, I'm going to be very seriously ill and I might even die. But this microbe was living in an arsenic-based environment. So he was living in an environment that is poisonous to every other life form in the planet. And that just opens up the possibilities for so many different types of life, so many different forms of life, because before we only used to think that life would have to follow this very predictable path along carbon-based life forms and have to develop similar to us. But the very fact that on our very own planet there are microbes that completely ignore that and are completely different in their biological makeup to us, that is just a huge suggestion to me that there is going to be different types of life form in other parts of the galaxy, because there is a life form living on our planet which shares basically nothing in common with us. You know, this microbe has been formed in just a completely different way to every other form of life we know of in the planet. And that is something that is just incredible to me, that even on this planet there is a life form which has nothing in common to us. So if you look at the whole majesty and the scale of the universe, you cannot sit there and think that we are the only ones, or we are unique, or that we are the only intelligent life, or the only life in general, because we have found life on our own planet which doesn't conform to our, you know, beliefs of life and how it should form. So if our own planet can throw up a surprise like that, imagine what the universe has to offer for us. And you know, that's the whole thing, and that's the thing that really amazes me about that, is that our planet, the planet that we've lived on for millions and millions of years, is still throwing up surprises. You know, we don't know our planet at all. We know 10% of the information about it. We haven't discovered any, you know, all of these life forms we haven't discovered. So when there's so much for us to discover about our own planet, just think of how much there is to learn about the universe. And there is no way at all that we can sit here and look at everything that's around us and look at all of the stars out there and think that we are somehow unique and that we are the only life forms out there. But before I dive into a conclusion, there are some little bits of evidence I want to bring up that are against the idea that there might be extraterrestrial life out there. And obviously, you know, there is all of this theory and the Drake equation and the possibility of life on Titan, and the belief that Mars might have had an atmosphere back in the day because of what telescopes have picked up. But the simple fact of the matter is, we haven't received any communications at all from anywhere that we can definitively say is caused by life or intelligent life. We have scoured the galaxy for decades now, and we've scoured the solar system for decades, we've scoured every bit of the space we can think of for decades, and we have come up with nothing apart from the wow signal, which, you know, is going to be debatable. I mean, I personally have literally no idea what that could be. It's just from an empty patch of space, but of course there are all these theories. But it's just still a theory, you know. There is nothing 100% concrete, definitive, you know, that we can claim is definitely extraterrestrial life. Now, the best way to probably explain this is through the Fermi paradox. Now, the Fermi paradox is basically a hypothesis made by an Italian physicist, I think, called Enrico Fermi. Now, what he was saying was that, you know, the universe is so old and so big that extraterrestrial life should be common. But the fact is, we haven't seen anything, any concrete evidence, no communications, no broken down spaceships, no probes, nothing at all to suggest extraterrestrial life. And that is the question, why? Why haven't we seen this? You know, everything we have points to the fact that extraterrestrial life should be common, it should be broad. But if you actually look at the details that we have that say definitively that there is life out there, we have nothing. You know, everything we have is hypothesis, everything we have is just conjecture at the moment. You know, we have a lot of very, very good scientific theories out there, but at the moment we lack that, you know, that first contact moment, that first bit of evidence that definitively suggests it. And that's what Fermi was asking. He was asking why. Why, if the universe is this big and this old and this likely to be teeming of life, why haven't we found anything yet? And that is the thing. We still haven't found anything definitive. And that is what gives these extraterrestrial life deniers more belief that there isn't life out there, that we are the only life out there, you know, because we haven't found anything. And we have been scouring the skies for years. You know, Galileo had a telescope looking up into the sky. You know, we've got telescopes the size of cities now pointing at the sky. We've got the Hubble telescope flying off into the very furthest reaches of our solar system, looking out into space. And not one of these things, not one of these telescopes, not one of these listening devices, not one astronaut flying up in space, nothing has been found. Nothing, not one suggestion, nada, nout, nothing. And don't you think that's a little bit unusual? Don't you think that we've spent so much time with so many different things, looking into so many different directions at so many different planets, and we've found nothing? And that is a little bit surprising and a little bit, you know, it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? It just makes you wonder, are we the only people in the galaxy? And that is what Fermi raised. It's like, are we the only ones? Because surely if we've been looking for this length of time and this hard in so many different directions, surely we would have found something by now. And that is the big dilemma, you know. All of this evidence, you know, with the arsenic-based life form found on Earth, with the possibility of life in Titan, and just the vast size of the universe, everything you look at points to there being life. But until we find that definitive first contact, or that little bit of broken spaceship on Mars, or whatever we find, it's still just theory, it's still conjecture, it's still opinion. And until we have that, I know scientific theories are very, very well done, and they are not guesswork. You know, scientific theories are based on all the available evidence. And that's why I think, you know, when people criticise the theory of evolution and go, oh, it's only just a theory, they are misunderstanding what a scientific theory is. A scientific theory is not guess. It's not a guess. It's not guesswork. It is strongly based on every piece of available evidence. It is the best interpretation of the evidence we have. And at the moment, the best interpretation of the evidence we have suggests that there should be life, but we can't find any. And that is the big thing. Until we get that little piece of definitive evidence, everything we say now is still unsupported. But before I get too deep into this argument, I think I'm going to conclude. I know I've missed out tons of evidence for both sides, but to be honest, if I mentioned every bit of evidence for and against, I would be here for years. There's been so much talk about this, so much debate, so much scientific evidence provided for both sides, you know. If you're interested about this, dive in. There's so much information all over the web, all over libraries, everywhere, so go and have a look. But, you know, in my own personal opinion, this is all this is. Of course you can disagree with me. That's the whole point of being a human, to disagree. You know, if everyone had the same opinion, life would be boring. But my personal opinion is that the universe is too big, and we've looked at too small a proportion of it for only very seriously for the last, like, 60 years. Since the 1960s, that's only when we've really seriously scoured the skies. And, you know, we've looked at less than 0.00001% of everything in the universe. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the scratch on top of the surface. You know, that is how little we have looked. And in this little tiny smidgen of info we've looked at, we've already found places where life could exist. And if life can exist somewhere else, the chances are it will exist. If the conditions are there, you know, the chances are that nature or something will happen and life will spark. And we're not too sure how life does spark at the moment. Obviously, there's lots of theories, and that's a completely other Sunday Talk episode right there. But, you know, for me personally, looking up into the sky at night and seeing all of these stars out there, you cannot look at all of this grandeur and all of this, you know, size and scale of the universe and not think that somewhere on some little planet at some corner of the universe there's another form of life looking up and thinking the same thing. And you know, that's what I'm going to conclude on. I really hope you've enjoyed it. You know, I've certainly enjoyed looking into this. I'm a huge space buff. I think you can probably tell. I am really into space travel and pushing the boundaries of human exploration. So this was really, really enjoyable for me. If you have enjoyed the video, I would be thrilled if you could take the time to rate it and comment on it, both what you thought and possible topics for the future. You know, I'm completely open to suggestions. This is all about you firing questions at me and me getting answers out for you. So guys, I really hope you've enjoyed the video. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and have a fantastic day.